anyways, without further ado, I will introduce Mr. Matt. We will break at 8 o'clock for about 15 minutes. We'll wrap up at 9, and the bathrooms are right your way down to the kitchen area. There are washrooms right there. Anyways, thank you, Mr. Matt Lee.
Okay. Hi. That was ungainly entrance. Hey, so Kathy told me I needed to introduce myself, which is always a bizarre thing for me to do, because talking about yourself is awkward and painful. So we'll treat this like a Band-Aid. We'll get it over with quickly. So I'm a web designer and developer, self-taught. I've been doing it for about almost 4 years, full-time for 3 years. I have my own web design company called Soma Design. The URL is right at the bottom there. And so my wife Jacqueline works with me in a design capacity as well. And then the rest of it is me, design, develop. Lucked into WordPress when it was not as big a deal as it is today, and taught myself a bunch of stuff there, been involved with the community, and yeah, it's turned out to be a really great thing to accidentally wind up in. It's a great platform, and actually as of WordCamp San Francisco, which was just this past weekend, it's kind of the big WordPress conference of the year. It was announced that WordPress powers approximately 13% of the sites on the internet. So it's a lot, and about 20% of newly created domains on the internet, which is pretty mind-blowing. So yeah, it's a force to be reckoned with, and so hopefully by the end of tonight you'll know a little more and be a little more familiar with it. Yeah, and so I myself, I work with local small businesses, a lot of my own clients, and I also work as a subcontractor with a California-based firm. They sign kind of big contracts with big companies. I've worked for them with companies like Seagate, the GigaOM blog network. We did a redesign on that. Various IEEE organizations. Zillow, it's a home, it's a real estate branch under Yahoo. So yeah, big stuff like that. They're crazy good at sales. I just do the code. they're good at that. Great guys to work with. I work regularly with them. They're a lot of fun. So today we're going to learn how to build a portfolio with WordPress. WordPress gives you a lot of power. A lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with the power. I mean, the first way you get involved with WordPress generally is you install it and you start looking for themes. Or at least this is the way I got started. You install it, you start looking for themes, and you find one that's kind of like what you want, but you want to change it a little. And so eventually you pull open some code. You find out that it's not actually that hard. And you do a little more. You go on some forums, you go on some websites. And before you know it, they trick you into learning a bit of PHP, a little bit of programming, and yeah, I mean, it really just kind of crept up on me where I realized, oh, I know how to use this. This is weird. So hopefully today I can walk you through a little bit of that process too. I'm assuming a bit of a baseline of knowledge here. I'm assuming that code isn't completely foreign to you here. If it is, some of this might be a little over your head. This is an intermediate level session. Just as a show of hands, how many people here would consider themselves to be designers primarily? Okay, and how many developers primarily? And how many are annoyed that I'm drawing the distinction? Me too. I do both. How many people have never edited a WordPress file ever? Okay, that's fewer than I expected. Awesome. So, sorry guys, some of this will be a little over your head, but hopefully not too bad. We're not diving in too deep here. We're just using some kind of sort of just above beginner level functionality to do some really interesting things. Hopefully this is just going to teach you some of what WordPress makes available to you to really easily work. I mean, I'm at the point where using WordPress for me is faster than not using it, right? So, and that's why I love it. It really just makes it easy to do my job, and that's what good technology should do. So yeah, I asked you about the knowledge you have, and by the end of this, hopefully you will have knowledge of how to make a child theme and what that actually means. How to make a custom content type. WordPress calls it post type. We'll go. There's some interestingly bad naming in WordPress for things, so we'll get into that. How to add and retrieve metadata, because various pieces of content. That, and how to create a custom content type template. So how to dive into your WordPress theme and set up specific files for your new content type. So in this case, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into child themes, because they make it really easy to do some fast development with WordPress. You can start somewhere and then make your modifications really nicely. So how many people have no idea what a child theme is? Okay, not bad, not bad. So a child theme in WordPress is basically you have a parent theme and you have a child theme. So so the great part about it is, it's quick and you don't repeat yourself. It's a good coder acronym, DRY. So you have a parent theme and a child theme. And so basically all you do when you're setting up a child theme, in your themes directory, you make a new folder, just any folder, and all you have to have in there is a style.css file. That's really all you have to have. And the only thing you need to have in that file is a theme name, just at the top here in CSS comments. Give it a theme name and give it a template, and that references the parent theme that you're going to be referencing, that you're going to be basing your child theme off of. And so it's basically inheriting everything from that parent theme, except for the places you override it. So basically, it's at the beginning, it's just like having the parent theme. There's really no differences. We're going to get into those differences as we build it up. We're going to base it on 2011. So 2011, right there, that's the parent theme. And so that's just the folder of the, that's just the directory of the parent theme, the directory name. 2011 is the current WordPress default theme. I was hoping Ian would be here to point out. Ian Stewart works for Automatic, lives here in Winnipeg. Automatic is the company that does WordPress.com, and they contribute a lot to the WordPress open source project. And he is one of the people largely responsible for the 2011 theme. I was hoping to be able to embarrass him, but he's not here. And yeah, it's a great theme. There's a lot of good stuff about it. And so it's a great place to start because you have it by default when you first install WordPress, so everyone can start there. So parent-child terminology, you'll see this in a lot of places in WordPress. WordPress has ways of talking about things that are in the code and ways of talking about things that are in the user interface and kind of in the general language. So you have the parent theme and the child theme, but in a lot of the code, the parent theme is called the template, and the child theme is called the style sheet. Don't ask me why. It's there. They can't change it now. So you'll just see these things interchangeably. So when you see something referring to a template, it's usually referring to the to the parent theme. That's why we saw here template 2011. That's the parent theme. And if at any point I'm not clear on a topic, feel free to shoot up your hand. And I mean, this is all old hat to me, so I can sometimes not explain things well enough. Feel free to stop me. I won't be insulted or anything. So here you see just in the directory structure, right? This is the themes. This is the themes directory. This is where WordPress has all the themes. I've got a few themes in here. There's the 2011 directory. It's open. So that's the parent theme. It's got a whole bunch of files. So we're going to make a My Portfolio theme, right? And it's got that style.css file in it. That's the baseline for, that's the baseline for a child theme, simple. And so at this point, it's the same theme, only we have a different base style sheet here. So child theme inheritance. WordPress has a lot of theme template files. Index.php is the only one you really have to have, and then you can branch out for like category views, tag views, single posts, pages. You can get really granular with all the templates you want for very specific pieces of content. And so basically what WordPress does in a parent-child theme situation, first it looks at the child theme. Is the file there? Like if it's looking for index.php. If it's not in the child theme, then it looks in the parent theme. Very, very, very basic inheritance. And so that way, if there is a file that you want to change something in, all you have to do is just copy it into your child theme and make your modifications there. The great part about this is if the parent theme ever has a theme update, if you don't make a child theme, the theme update is actually going to overwrite all the changes you made, and you're going to lose all the work you did. So even if you're not making a whole lot of modifications, it's always a best practice if you are wanting to modify a theme at all and you want to be able to update it in the future. Always make a child theme, and even if you're just making small modifications, that way you don't lose your changes. That way you can install any updates without fear of losing your changes. Yes.
Is a child theme like you copy the parent theme, put it in there, and you adapt that, and it acts as a filter back to the other one, or is it just completely different?
So you don't copy it, you just reference it. Okay, so that if we come back to here, right, we've got the My Portfolio theme, right, and the style.css. That's all you need to start, and I showed you right, and this is all that's in there. And so when you're pointing to that 2011 theme, you're pointing to the 2011 theme as your parent theme, and at that point it says to WordPress, grab everything out of the parent theme except for the places where I have that same file. If you have that same file, like index.php in the child theme, WordPress is going to use that one instead of the one in the parent theme. So you've kind of, just by doing this, you've kind of made a copy without having to really copy.
It's a mechanism that avoids having to copy.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to copy. You only need one, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for asking. So yeah, it looks in the child theme first. If it's not there, it looks in the parent theme. One exception, though, is the functions.php from both the child theme and the parent theme are loaded if they're there. So both of them are loaded. And in the order of first the child theme and then the parent theme. So often you'll see a parent theme author, if they're declaring a function, they will they'll wrap it in a conditional to see if that function exists at all. And that way you can actually you can actually override even that function, because PHP doesn't have the dynamic feature where you can override a function. And so this way, a lot of parent themes will first do a check if a function exists, and that way you can define it in your child theme's functions.php file. You'll actually see if you dig into the code of 2011 that it does that extensively in order to be a good parent theme. So yeah, and so functions.php, if you're not aware, it's kind of like a mini plugin built right into your theme that's automatically loaded if your theme is active. And so you can just put little bits of functionality into your functions.php. Sometimes a lot of functionality. We're going to be doing a moderate amount in there today as we code up this portfolio template. Yeah, some people even put too much functionality in there. That's a WordPress community debate, how much should be in a theme and how much should be in separate plugins. But we will not engage in those religious wars today. So yeah, child themes, only change what needs changing, right? Or work smarter, not harder. Let the parent theme do most of the work for you. Find one that is somewhat close to what you want, and then make some modifications. It'll just make, especially at the beginning when you're just getting familiar with WordPress, you only want to change what you want to change. You don't want to have to code the whole thing. It makes it really quick and easy to get involved. This would have made it a lot easier. Child themes haven't been in WordPress the whole time, which is kind of why some of the terminology is as bizarre as it is. Would have been a lot easier when I got started if they existed. So yeah, we're gonna do some coding. Like I said, the functions.php file is inside the My Portfolio theme that we're about to make here, and that's where we're gonna write most of this functionality. I'm not actually gonna write it. It's already been written. I'm not gonna live write this. I thought about this, but I thought that would maybe be painful for everyone involved. I don't know if I'm fast enough for that. But I will actually be releasing all the code for this after the presentation, so you'll be free, and this presentation as well, so you'll be free to look at the code and the presentation and see what I've done. So portfolio, if you're going to make a portfolio needs some items, right? You need things in your portfolio. And so this is where we're going to use WordPress's built-in register post type function. Now, as I've already alluded to, WordPress has some terminology quirks. In this case, the quirk is WordPress started out as a blogging tool. And so WordPress thinks of most things in terms of posts or blog posts. That was kind of the base chunk of content that WordPress started out with. And WordPress has since grown out of that and later added the other post type called pages. So instead of in the reverse chronological blog loop, you have this static about page or a contact page, these kinds of things. And then in WordPress 3.0, which came out about a year and a half ago, the ability to fully use your own custom post types was introduced. Again, unfortunately, we're calling them post types still because that's the WordPress terminology. We should be calling them articles or content types or something like this, but you're stuck with the history you have in a platform. And so internally, WordPress calls these all post types. So we're going to make a portfolio post types that we can have because our portfolio items aren't blog posts. We might make a blog post on our site to point to a new portfolio item that we've posted, but the portfolio item is its own thing. Incidentally, I've been having a lot of terminology problems. What do you call it? Is it a portfolio item? Do you pluralize portfolios? I have no idea. I call them portfolio items. We'll get to that in a bit. So this is the simple function where we're going to register. We're going to register our custom post type. I'm calling it SD_portfolio. We're going to dive further into this in a moment because this is probably looking like Greek to some of you. We're going to walk through this step by step. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a crash course in hooks. Hooks are this idea in WordPress that are the foundation of the plugin system. WordPress has a great plugin system. You can basically, through its various hooks, you can basically completely change the way WordPress operates. I'm using these every day in my development, and yeah, you rarely find a place where you want a hook that one isn't already in there. But you're asking, what is a hook? Well, that's what we're going to answer. So there's two types of hooks. The first one is called actions. So if you think of WordPress as running in a process, start to finish, right? Start to finish. At points along the way, WordPress fires various actions that says, I'm here. Is there anything that wants to run now? And we can register our own functionality to run at these various points along the way. There's a few key ones that are pretty common that you might want to hook into. We already saw this one here. I hooked into the init action. Init's a pretty common software thing. It's just when WordPress is setting itself up, initializing itself. That's a pretty common one to hook functionality to. Another common one is the action called WP_head. That basically runs inside the theme's header. So in your actual HTML file, between the open and close head tags, the WP head action runs. And so that's a great one for, say, you want to echo out some typekit JavaScript lines, or maybe you want to throw in some stuff for Google. You want to throw in some robots tags or some no-follow tags or something like that. You're going to use WP head, and this way you can just develop this little bit of functionality without having to edit your theme file at all. It is just going to inject this into any theme, because all WordPress themes run this in that head area, or at least all good ones do. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. And so the other kind of hook is called a filter. So a filter is like an action; it runs at a point, but it also provides the ability for a function to change a piece of information, a string or an array or something. So it allows you to modify things. And again, this is really powerful. I mean, especially filters is the foundation of what makes, like, you can change anything, basically, once you get really familiar with the places WordPress offers filters. So here's an example. So you can add a filter on the title. And so that's when WordPress is like putting out a post title, or in our case, a portfolio item title. You're then able to, so in this case, we're going to do no orphans. Typographically, an orphan is a single word that appears on a line by itself. That's considered a bad practice. So maybe you run a bit of fancy regex or something like that, and you put in a non-breaking space in the last space, so those last two words will always stay together, and you'll never have a word all by itself. There is actually a plugin out there that does this. I just didn't fit on a slide. But yeah, so when you're running a filter, though, so we've added a filter. Always return the passed-in filter value. So if you wouldn't return something, suddenly all your titles and your whole blog would be blank, because you just took that data out of play, and it wouldn't exist. So often inside of a filter function like this, you'll maybe be even running checks to see if it should be modified. Maybe it be modified in some cases. Maybe we're only modifying this if it's a portfolio item title, not if it's a blog post title. You might put in checks, but just always, even if it doesn't pass your check, always return the title at the end. So when I write a filter, the first thing I do is I write my return statement at the end, because that just ensures that I'm not going to forget about it later, because I've never done that. Never at all, and spend hours debugging why everything disappeared. So we already saw both actions and filters. They connect a hook with a function of your own, and there's a little more to them. You can actually pass additional arguments. There's syntax, and you can say what order it's going to be in with some additional arguments. You can research that on your own. We're just keeping this pretty basic, but there is a greater functionality, especially to pass in extra arguments so that you can run the various checks in case you only want to do things in certain cases. You have some extra context for what's being passed in. So let's come back to registering our post type here. So we're adding our action on init, which is actually the place you should always register a post type, always on init. If you do it before, bad things can and will happen. So this is always, if you're registering your own custom post type, it should happen at the init action. And so then we give it a function name. I'm using SD init. This is as good a time as any to say a good WordPress practice is to always prefix your functions and your keys and various things inside. That way you play nicely with other things that are out there. Again, as I already said, PHP is not a true dynamic language, which basically means if two people try and declare the same function, the whole thing comes crashing down, which isn't fun. And so good practice is in your code, always make sure you have some kind of prefix. So my company is Soma Design, so I underscore everything with an SD underscore, and then whatever I'm going to use. You could also use classes for namespacing today, but we're going to keep things basic. But for people who know what that means, you can do that too. And I usually do. So
and so even as we come here to the actual post type, I'm even prefixing that, because you're seeing actually an increase in a lot of WordPress themes and plugins registering their own custom post types for various functionality. So I just want to make sure I'm not going to collide with them. I'm not going to use just the basic portfolio. I'm still going to prefix it just to make sure that we're playing nice with everybody, because they might have other plugins running to do various things as well. We don't want to clash with them. So it'll take a bunch of arguments, this register post type function, and we will dive into the pertinent ones in a moment. And yeah, the function is register post type, and we're going to use the SD portfolio name for our post type. And so that's just how it gets stored in the database. That's really all that matters for. We're not going to be seeing that all over the place. And yeah, so that's how you register a post type. But if you did this right now, nothing would happen. WordPress will acknowledge internally that that post type exists, but you're not going to see any changes. That's why we're going to dive into what these arguments actually do. So we're going to run through them one at a time. So the first one that really matters is, what does the post type support? This pertains to what features you're actually going to see in your administrative UI. So in this case, you're going to see a field for title, a field for just the normal editor, and a field for a thumbnail or a featured image. We'll get into that more later. So that's all we're going to support. There's various things you can support, and the WordPress Codex is an excellent documentation site, one of the better ones in the open source community, and all the things that could go in that supports list are available there as well. We're not going to cover all the arguments today. So the next thing we're going to look at is the rewrite. And so WordPress can give us some really nice permalinks. None of this $P equals nonsense. We're going to use some nice good-looking permalinks. And so in this case, by default, we could just give this, say, rewrite true, but then by default, WordPress is actually going to use our actual post type, and we don't want SD_portfolio appearing in our links, because that just looks bad, and you should care about what your URLs look like, because they should look good. And so we're going to give it a slug. We're going to give it a slug of portfolios. So we just pass in an array. And for the coders, it's not that scary. Arrays are your friend. You'll use them. And so an array, and our slug is portfolio. And that then is going to produce our portfolio slug here that prefixes all of our actual portfolio items. And so, yeah, whatever your portfolio item is, WordPress automatically constructs this slug right here for your actual portfolio item. You can customize it if you want, but by default, it just goes all lowercase, replaces all spaces with dashes. It does the job for most people automatically, but you can customize that as well if you want to be very specific about where that URL should land you for that specific portfolio item. So and this is cumulative. I mean, in this array, we're going to have the supports, we're going to have the rewrite. So you'll see all this in the code at the end. We're just going through them one by one here. Another one is has archive. What that essentially means, and again, this is another weird terminology place in WordPress. WordPress talks about a post type archive. So essentially, that's the place where it lists a lot of portfolio items. Right? By default, WordPress will grab the 10 most recent portfolio items, kind of like the 10 most recent blog posts on your homepage. You can modify that number, and I'll show you a bit later too how to modify that if you want that to be a different number, and it'll sort them again by default, reverse chronologically, show the newest one first, moving its way down. You can modify that order again if you want, but that's what it's going to give you by default. And you can use the same. You can use the same slug. Usually, it's a good practice to do a plural here because you got more than one. So, but again, like I said earlier, portfolios seems like a very odd thing to say. Yes, I don't have multiple portfolios. I have one. So again, that'll give us example.com/portfolio, and that is the place that's the place where our portfolio will be. So I think just to break out of the code here for a moment, I'll even give you a little preview of what that's going to look like. So that's going to look something like this. So again, I've set this up on a demo domain of my own /portfolio, and I'm pretending like I've designed some of the biggest websites in the world in this portfolio to amuse myself as I made this presentation. We'll maybe read some of the copy later. It's greatly amusing to me. But so here I actually built it in a slideshow format. So we're just cycling through them. It's listing each. I was able to associate a thumbnail with it, give it a title, etc. We'll come back. This is a little preview of the finished product. But this is what those arguments are providing the ability for. This page that lists that lists multiple. In this case, I have 5 portfolio items. So that's where we're going to get to in the end. So we also want to give it some good labels. Again, in the admin area, if you don't provide any labels, it's just going to say posts. It's going to get confusing because these aren't blog posts; these are portfolio items. So the name, we're going to say portfolio items. That's the plural, and singular name is a portfolio item. And there's a lot more arguments, such as no portfolio items found in trash and things like this, just to completely customize the UI. You'll see all of these in the code afterwards that I release. But we're only going to show these 2 basic ones on, because otherwise this slide would get too large. And I think that might even be the last registration argument I've covered. Are there any questions so far?
Is there like a cheat sheet of all the arguments you can get somewhere?
Yep. Like I said earlier, the WordPress Codex, WordPress or codex.wordpress.org, extensive documentation on not all WordPress functions, but certainly the most important ones, and this is one of the very most important ones. It's well documented on there. Yes?
So these all go in your functions.php file?
Mm-hmm. Yep, correct. Great question. That's where that's where all the coding we're doing is going. Alternately, if you really wanted, you could actually put this. You could put this in a plugin. You could make your own plugin. We're not going to cover how to do that today, but again, it's really simple to make a plugin. Yes.
Are you using the word portfolio because that's the term, or because you're building a portfolio at the other end? You know, like a portfolio is a folio of stuff that's inside the code, or is it that we're using that term because you're building a portfolio at the end to show all those sites?
You're building your portfolio at the end to show all your sites.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. The more I've looked at this, incidentally, the more odd portfolio as a word has looked to me. I think I'm going to be having some interesting dreams about it. All right, so we've got a couple more. These are pretty key, actually. So our public, that just means that it's visible on the front end of the website, that people are able to actually view this stuff. So that's pretty important. Public, true, and the show UI is true. That means to show the admin UI. Again, we're going to want that. We're going to want to be able to enter, edit, or add and edit portfolio items as we go along. And yeah, it's actually really straightforward to do so. In fact, just to give you a slight idea here, I will actually show you quickly what that admin area looks like. So you see right here, we've got portfolio items listed in the side, right? So we could view all, or we could add a new one. So let's view them all. So again, this is what the show UI argument is getting us. So we see our 5 items here. We could edit or quick edit, which gives us just access to a few key fields there. We could trash it, or we could actually view that individual item. If you go into it here quickly, if you recall, we we told it supported a title. We have a title, and we've got some excellent and intelligent text right there. And we've got this featured image over here, or thumbnail, as it said in supports. Again, this is one of the places the terminology is a bit different in one place or the other. And this is where we get to associate a specific image with that one. And we're going to have some metadata. We'll come back to that in a minute. But this is an idea of what the admin area is going to look like once you add that stuff. It looks exactly the same, basically, as, say, for posts. So here's a post. So it's using the exact same stuff. It's just one's a blog post, one's a portfolio item. So we will come back to that in a little bit. All right. So yeah, featured image. I was just talking about that. So featured image is what it says in the admin area there. In the code, it talks about the thumbnail or the post thumbnail. So again, one of these places where the terminology is different. It actually used to say the thumbnail in the UI, but featured image was actually better for what it actually does. But you're stuck with it in the code. So now you have to talk both. So yeah, it lets you associate a specific image with a post or a page or a portfolio item or whatever content type is out there. Say you're making an event calendar, which I've written a good chunk of a plugin that does that. You want a specific image for your event. That would be another post type that you could use this for. Yeah, so again, it's perfect for a portfolio. I mean, with a portfolio, often you want to show more than one image, but in this case, we're going to just show one image. We don't quite have time to get into the techniques for showing multiple, although you could quite easily, just in the normal WordPress way with the editor there, just embed various images in the kind of editor area. It's quite simple to do, but programmatically we're not going to get into that. So we're going to assume that you only want one. Now you're going to actually want probably a specific size. So WordPress is really good this way. It lets you set custom image sizes as well. And so basically what happens then is whenever you upload a file, WordPress by default internally does a thumbnail. It's like a 150 by 150 thumbnail, and a medium size and a large size. It automatically just makes a few resizes there, so things will fit in a blog post better. You yourself can register your own image sizes for whatever context you want to display it in. And that way, again, anytime it's uploaded, WordPress just automatically runs this, and it makes all the image sizes you've told it to. It's really nice because you can upload your 10 megapixel image, but WordPress will still run it through and just automatically resize it to the size you need. And so it comes in super handy. You don't have to spend as much time in Photoshop. In some cases you're going to need to, but yeah, this makes it super simple, super easy. I like it a lot. My clients are generally amazed that they didn't have to, resize something first before uploading it, because oftentimes they don't know how to and have had pain with that in the past. Yes, please.
Is it absolute sizing? Can you give it a percentage to resize it to? Or do you
It is absolute, yeah. Yeah. So that is one drawback. Yes.
If the image has different aspect ratio,
Mm-hmm.
crop it?
We will answer that question in just a moment. But by default, you only pass 2 arguments. Well, let's just actually go through the arguments here. So you can add an image size, and again, we're just giving it a name. We're using our good old underscore here, and then later in your actual theme code, you just call the post thumbnail that image size, and it's going to spit out that size, just right there. You've assigned it in the UI, and it's just going to spit it out. So you have the actual name of it, and then the first is the width, and then is the height, and then the third argument is an optional argument, and that's if it should crop absolutely to that size. So in this case, whatever image is uploaded, it's going to get cropped to 1000 by 500. Just going to happen. If there's excess on one of the sides where the aspect ratio doesn't fit, it's going to get cut off. It's going to focus on the center, so maybe some of the top and the bottom will get cut off. So because we want this exact size, this exact aspect ratio for our theme. If you leave that to false or just leave the argument out entirely, then it's going to resize to whichever of these is biggest in the whatever works best for the aspect ratio that you uploaded. So if you uploaded, a 1,000 by 1,000 image, it's gonna actually resize it to, well, it'll just stay 1,000 by 1,000. It's just gonna grab the biggest one of these and do it that way.
Is that like a fit to box? Can you do a fit to box, like say it's 1,000 by 1,000, and then the tall or the wide would fit?
Yeah. So you could totally declare that, and then just leave the third one false. Yeah, and then you could do it that way, for sure. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. So in our case, we want a very specific aspect ratio, so we are going to do that cropping. And there you have to be a little more careful then with your uploading. I actually ran into this with mine. I just uploaded them willy-nilly, and it kind of cut off the headers of all the website photos I uploaded, and it looked terrible. I had to do it over again. So you have to be a little bit careful. I wish you could specify where it would crop to, if it would crop to top, or bottom, or sides. You can't do that, unfortunately. It doesn't quite do everything for you, but it does a lot. Comes in very handy. So yeah, there's more to a portfolio, though, than just a title and an image. You're going to want things like, what was the work you did? What was the agency you worked for if you were a freelancer? Like, who did you contract to? Or maybe it was your agency, you just want to say that. The URL of the finished work, you want people to be able to click off and go see the website you built or whatever the end product was. Maybe a quote from the client to say what a great person you were to work with. Maybe some other things. Can anyone name anything else they'd want to see on their portfolio?
The name of the designer that designed it.
Name of the designer, yep, you could do that. You might want to even categorize things. We're not going to get into taxonomies, but WordPress provides powerful custom taxonomies. You might want to, categorize by type. Like this was a design project, this was an identity project, this was a logo project, etc. This was a WordPress project, this was a Ruby on Rails project. You might want to break it down even by that. We're not going to get into that, but WordPress can do that. We're not going to get into those taxonomies today, but they're really, really easy to register. About the same level of effort as we just saw for registering a post type. So yeah, by default, WordPress has, in its posts, it has categories and tags. Those are taxonomies. And so we could register a work type taxonomy if we wanted. That would be another thing we could possibly do. I have that on my own site for separating out websites and logo design work we've done in my own portfolio. But we're not going to get into that today. There's too much stuff we could cover. So there's a few things. So we're going to do these things. You would be very free to add to this list, subtract to this list if you were building this yourself. And hopefully by the end you'll know how to do that. So again, we're going to make this so that you have essentially, WordPress has all these kind of little boxes. It calls them meta boxes internally. We're going to make one that gives us the ability to enter all that data in the admin screen. Now this, like I say, it's a rare thing that WordPress does not make easy. Most of the things we've looked at have very, very easy functionality. You just write a few lines of code and it exposes to you a lot of functionality. This is not one of them, adding arbitrary metadata. By default, I'll just show you what this would look like if we weren't making our own meta box. If we actually look under posts here, by default, WordPress has this box right down here at the bottom called custom fields, and this lets you set pieces of metadata. So you pick a meta key from this drop-down, and then you enter a value. But if it's not in that drop-down because it doesn't exist yet, well, then you got to enter it. And then you got to go over to your value and enter a value. And it's a really painful way to do this, and it's kind of got this underscore stuff, and you're not really sure if this is working, if this is really what you want. Some people try and get their clients to do this, and nobody wants to do this because it's awful. And so there's a way you can there's a way you can enter that same data in its own dedicated box, but you got to do some programming for that. And like I said, this isn't something, like making these is not something that WordPress makes easy out of the box, and it's something I've hand-coded time and time again, and I've been really frustrated with it. And so I'm going to show you a couple of ways you can do that much more simply. But just to give you an idea of the pain, here's a bit of code that would make a meta box with one item in it and allow you to save it. And it's also terribly insecure and needs more code in it to be properly secure. Someone could, while logged in, send along some arbitrary information and actually enter data into your database with a well-crafted link. That would be not awesome. So again, for beginners, this is a terrible thing to have to code yourself because you don't know about security. And in this case, again, this would at least give us the ability to just set the live URL for the site. Just that. This is enough to do just that. But it's tedious and it's insecure. It needs some more. It needs some more code. So as I say, horribly insecure. Never actually do this because you need to be doing other things to check that this data was entered by the right person. We're not checking permissions here, and we're not checking intention here, that they actually intended to do this. These are things that WordPress gives us the ability to do, and are not exactly a beginner-friendly piece of code to do, and so we're not going to do those. And I'm not even going to show you how, because there's better ways that abstract that away from you. But this is about half of the code you would need to write just for one item. So that's not very fun. And that's what I have to say to that, because I've done lots of it.
How do you pronounce that?
I don't want to spit into the mic. So the beginner-friendly way is the More Fields plugin. It's fantastic. I've used it a lot on client sites. It just gives you a user interface in the WordPress admin to easily make a meta box, assign various types of fields within it, tell WordPress which post type that should be assigned to. I'll actually just give you a quick little demo of that. Let's go back into here, and so I think I installed that. Settings, yeah. So I've installed the plugin already. I gave you the URL there. And so we're going to make a new input box. Okay, so portfolio meta, and used with the post type. Well, we don't want it on post. We actually want it on portfolio item post type. So we're going to save that. So this is, again, one of the many places it's important to assign good labels to your post type. So now we have that input box, but nothing in it. So we're going to click down here. The user interface on this plugin isn't quite the best. Sometimes you get a little lost in it. We're going to add a new field. So give it a title. Let's say live URL. And the field key, this is what tells WordPress how to store this as a piece of data. On this post, this is the key, the live _ URL. It has to be a single word, no spaces. I'm not even sure if you're allowed to use hyphens. I think you have to use underscores. Not completely positive. You can give it a caption to just instruct the user what this means. So the finished work. And you can choose from a whole bunch of field types, just text or text area. Like you can even make a whole new WYSIWYG editor in there. Select field, radio boxes, check boxes, you get the idea, there's lots of them. In this case, just a simple text one is fine. And we'll save that. So now we've added a live URL field. We can go in and add a new one for, say, work done, etc. Maybe we wanted the client quote. Nope, typo. And we'll give that a text area. Don't need a whole editor for that. And so now if we go and add a new portfolio item, this is the other method right there. Oh. Looks like something went wrong. That never happens. Let's try this again. Let's see what happened there. Portfolio. All right, so let's try saving that. Make sure it wasn't a name clash. It is set. Oh, isn't this lovely, debugging in a presentation? If this doesn't work, we're not going to do it anymore. All right, let's see. Did it show up? Oh, there it is. I think it had the same name and it was getting overwritten by the other one. So it shows you right there. You know, we'd say Google, and sure enough, I'll save that as a draft, and it saves there, it shows back up, and now we'd be able to access that from the front end in our theme. We're going to learn how to do that later. So that's how you can do it in a nice user interface for people who are maybe not as code savvy, don't know as much about the security end of things. And that's fine. I don't like doing it that way. I would rather code it still, but give myself a little help along the way. But that's totally valid. I've done that on lots of sites. So the guys I do subcontracting for, their company was formerly called Shane and Peter, but they hired a guy named Reed, and that didn't really work as a name anymore. They're rebranding soon to Modern Tribe. So I did this code under contract for them. We're making this thing called Tribe MetaBox, and it's a class that really just allows you to really easily make these MetaBoxes. Again, it takes care of the security. It takes care of generating the interface. You just pass it a few arguments, and it makes it all, takes care of business for you. So this is the way I do all my own coding currently. It's great. So it's not yet released. It's actually going to be a component of a larger plugin that we're releasing any day now. Fingers crossed. Dan just asked me, but it's not quite out yet. It is actually embedded right here in the theme I've made for this presentation. So you can, any of the code savvy people can pull it right out of there and make use of it themselves. It's not super well documented, but you can see how I'm using it right now. So this is all you have to do to. So we're just gonna declare an array of meta fields. An array, just give it a name, what the meta key is, and what type it is, and then we create the actual box. Give it an ID, give it a title. Pages is what kind of post types it should appear on. In this case, only the SD portfolio one. And then we're referencing the meta fields we've set up there. And we just call the class new Tribe MetaBox, and it's going to make that. And again, you can put more fields in there. It supports most of the same field types that more fields did as well. Text area, WYSIWYG, select, all of these kinds of things. This is my preferred way of making these MetaBoxes for client CMS sites currently. Again, it's taking care of all the saving and validation and security stuff. You don't have to worry about it.
Why do you prefer this to the other one?
Very, very simply, because if I'm doing testing usually I have probably 3 versions of the same site running. I have one running on my local machine, I have one on the staging server, and one on the live server. If I'm depending on more fields for my user interface, now I'm actually depending on the database as well, because all the stuff is stored in the database. That creates more difficulty in syncing things up. If it's all just in the code, I don't have to worry about that, because now that logic is all living in code rather than in the database, and I prefer it that way. The other ways, With the other one too, though, you can export your fields and import them into another site. So it's pretty portable. It's pretty easy. It just adds an extra step that I don't want to have. I'd prefer to have all my logic live in my themes or my plugin. But great question. Some people prefer it the other way. You had a question?
Yes, is this part of the functions.php?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so this will just be in your functions.php or in a plugin or something, wherever WordPress is executing code. Like I said, functions.php is essentially a mini plugin inside your theme. It's just what works best for what we're doing here. Any other questions before I move along? Actually, yeah, I think this is actually a great place to have our break. So we basically set up the admin area, and so we have that all up and running. And so in the second half, we're going to use everything we've built there, and we're actually going to build out the theme with all the administrative UI and data that we've been able to enter. So we'll call it a break.
about 8:45, 10:50, and then we'll be doing a question and answer. And if you could have your evaluations, if you could be working on those starting at about 10 to 9, I'll be collecting those for the door prize draws. Great, thanks.
Okay, I am on. Excellent. Okay, so the last thing we did is we did the last piece of our admin UI. We've got our meta box set up so we can enter and save the metadata that we want. Just to go back into the admin UI here. That's actually in code here with the tribe meta box. I made this box: work done, agency, live site URL, and a client quote. Just the things I said earlier that we're going to want, and we can enter that on every portfolio item, edit, update. So that's what we made here. And just to show you for people who haven't seen it before, featured image, the way it works. So this little pop-up comes up. We'll pick a file. We don't actually even have to pick a file. We could actually go over to our media library, see all the images that have been uploaded elsewhere and previously. We could actually even just go to one of these. It looks all the same. And this is the UI for actually inserting an image into a post. But actually right here, you have this little link that says use featured image. The media UI here sucks. It's really bad. It's really confusing. There's way too much in it. And WordPress 3.3, which is just starting development right now, is supposed to be revamping this a whole bunch, which I'm very excited about. I hate this, but I hate every other system's media management that I've seen more. But this is terrible. But anyway, so you click use as featured image, saving, done, and now the image is here, and that's been updated as kind of the feature image for this post. So that's how you do that. And if you wanted to change it again, you could click remove and start all over again. All right, so let's go back into this. So we've set that up, and so now we're going to theme it. When you're making a custom post type, you have two files essentially that you're concerned with. In this case, archive dash your post type that we registered all the way back in register post type .php. So that's going to be the dedicated archive file. And the way that the WordPress the WordPress template system works is if it doesn't find that file, that's the first one it's going to look for when it's displaying your portfolio archive. I tried one of those cookies for a sugar blast, and it's really scratching my throat. Sorry for all the coughing here. And then it's going to work its way down. There's a whole theme hierarchy. If it doesn't find that, it's going to look for just the archive.php. There's big chart flow diagrams out there to show you the template hierarchy. It can be a little intimidating at first, but yeah, it's pretty good to use all the same. It's all Kurt's fault. It's gonna show you your 10 most recent portfolio items by default. And then your single file, single-sd portfolio.php, that's again the first file WordPress is going to look for a single portfolio item. If it doesn't find it, it'll fall back to just single.php, which is the WordPress standard for singles. And yeah, so loop refresher. This is the WordPress loop. How many people have no idea what I'm talking about here? Okay. So we're on an archive page or on an index page for our portfolio items. So that means we have more than one to show. And this is the so this is the code you run around the multiple items. So show the first one, and then it'll go back around, and it'll show the next one. So we can write the same code to show each portfolio item. And so this is what's going to loop us through the collection of the 10 portfolio items, or in our case, I think I only did 5 on the demo site I did. And so this is going to just loop us through those. So this is where all the WordPress template tags come into play. Most of them assume that you're in the loop, because that sets up various data and variables that WordPress uses internally to make all its template tags work. So when you're on the archive, this is the loop you'll run. You'll see this extensively in WordPress themes. It's just something you're going to see. Was someone asking a question? Yes, no? Okay. So we'll be using this. That's just a little refresher on the loop. And we'll be coming back to that. But the first thing we'll do, actually, we'll jump into a single portfolio item. That's right, I have my remote. Excellent. So again, as a refresher, single dash our post type.php. This would work for any particular post type. By default, like you wouldn't do single dash post because WordPress doesn't bother looking for that. That's one of the built-in ones, so it doesn't look for that at all. Again, that was the post type we registered earlier. So a single portfolio item. Again, we're assuming we're in the loop here. You even have to kind of loop, even though there's only one. It just sets up the WordPress environment properly. But there'll only be one on a single page. And you just call the post thumbnail and your image ID, the one we registered with add image size earlier, and that's going to spit out that image, like the fully formed HTML with the right URL for that particular size of the image. That's all you have to write. So you're going to want to use that in the appropriate place in your theme. Right, and that's, again, earlier we did add image size, your image ID, and then the rest of the arguments to give it width and height and whether or not it was going to crop. You can have multiple image sizes. I'm working on a project right now that has about a dozen of them, right, for various display contexts. So as many as you want. It can slow down your site for the administrators slightly, because basically WordPress is resizing each image to about 12 different sizes every time you upload an image. So it can make it a little slow for them, but that's a one-time thing. It doesn't really make the whole performance of your site suffer. Now those are resized. It can just pull them from the file system. But yeah, only use the ones you need. So we're going to display metadata. We stored all that metadata earlier. Now we're going to retrieve it and display it. So we're going to assign it to a variable. We're going to a PHP variable live URL equals, and so again, get post meta. That's the WordPress function for retrieving metadata, and it takes 3 arguments, which we will go over here. So the first argument is the current post ID, and there's a WordPress function called getTheID, which is the ID of the current post that we're looking at in our current loop. So whichever portfolio item I'm saying post, remember that also means portfolio item. A portfolio item in WordPress is a post because of the history of blogging. So get post meta, get the ID, that gets our current ID. That only works in the loop. If you're trying to run this function outside of a loop somewhere, you're going to have to know what that ID is through some other method. Live URL. This is the meta key. When I was doing the tribe meta class, that was the meta. That was the meta function. When we were doing the simple fields, it asked for the meta key. I don't custom field name, I think it called it. You have to pay attention to which one you used, and now we're grabbing it. So that's the meta key. And the third argument is a true or false thing, whether or not you should only grab a single piece of metadata. WordPress actually allows you to store multiple values on that same meta key. So say there were like 3 URLs, for instance, that were associated with this one project. Maybe you want to store all 3. There's other places where you maybe want to store more than one piece of metadata. It makes it more powerful for querying later on. Again, an events calendar plugin I worked on, for recurring events, we stored multiple start dates essentially on each event post. But in most cases, so if you wanted all of those, you would say false, and then you would get back an array of every single value. But if you only want one value, you say true for this, which is most cases. Most cases you only want one, and both of the frameworks I'm using assume you're only using one. So in most cases, we're just going to say true. Unfortunately, it's default false. I think that's a wrong default, but can't change it. So live URL, so we get post meta. That's our function to get this metadata. Get the ID. Live URL is our key. And true, we only want a single piece of metadata. That's all we're using, just one. And then maybe you just echo this out, except that's a security failure right here. You don't want to do this. And I've done this lots of times, and I've learned that that's not the way you should do it. This is what happens when you make a platform that makes it easy for idiots like myself to get started easily. They do dumb things, and thankfully none of my clients have been hacked for it. The security risk is actually very minimal, but they could do dumb things. Mostly what would happen here is they could potentially like break the HTML of their site. Say they had for some dumb reason they typed a quote in their URL. Well, that quote is going to show up here, and it's actually going to break the href attribute here, and it's going to show a bunch of garbage on my screen, and the link isn't going to work. So we don't want that. And cross-site scripting, people could maybe do some malicious things. Hopefully not. Hope people could do some dumb things. And so we don't want to just display this without doing a little bit of escaping or data sanitization. And if that sounds really hard, it's not with WordPress, because it gives you some nice functions to do this really easily. So we're going to actually go into that very briefly. And so WordPress has an escape URL function that'll just make sure that's a well-formed URL. It'll encode any entities, HTML encode, or URL encode rather. Make sure that URL is well-formed, and no characters are in there that shouldn't be URL characters. That's all you have to do. Just make sure you run it through the appropriate escaping function. And what is the appropriate escaping function? Well, we will get to that. So WordPress Security 101 is never trust any user-submitted data. Of course, that's not specific to WordPress. That's specific to any web development. But that's actually never trust any data, because sometimes you lose track of what's come from where. Basically, don't trust anything. That's how you get good security. And again, as much as possible, make use of what WordPress provides for you. And it's doing all this stuff behind the scenes in your post content and your post title. It's running it through all of this stuff. When you're getting the permanent link for a particular portfolio, it's sending it through that escape URL function. So here's a quick little rundown. This is a little diagram by one of the WordPress lead developers. Esc underscore, that's number one. That's the prefix for all of the WordPress escaping functions. All escaping means is because in certain contexts it has to do with mostly with quotes, right? When you're in HTML inside something, you have a quote. You don't want another quote in there. You need to escape that somehow and encode that with HTML. That's all it really means. Same thing for SQL and for and in an HTML context, you maybe don't want people to actually be able to show any tags. You want to convert those angle brackets into actual appearing angle brackets. You don't want them to be used for HTML tags. So the second one, ATTR or attr, that's the context. So the available contexts are attr. So attr is like an HTML attribute, like the ID or the class. HTML is when, again, like I said, you want to show some HTML, but you don't want people to have been able to insert any tags. JS, that's where you're actually echoing out some JavaScript in a JavaScript file or some inline JavaScript. SQL, which you'll almost never use. URL raw. A URL raw is actually what you use before you maybe put it in the database. You don't want to actually do the straight URL one. And text area, because it has a couple little quirks. You don't want to use the rest for inside a text area. And then the optional suffix, this is for translation. WordPress is actually really great. It's a really good system, provides a really good system for translatable strings. So the _e and the double underscore functions provide you with the capability for translations with getText systems. That doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry, that's not anything we're going to get into, but it's really good and powerful. And so you can actually just throw those on the end optionally. Most of the time you'll never use that third section, it'll just be like esc adder or esc HTML, things like that. And so there's more documentation on these functions here at this URL. I'll have these slides up after, and I'll even be writing a post with a few links from this presentation. So yeah, and if you're a WordPress developer and you aspire to develop more advanced things, I'm just scratching the surface here. Go watch Mark Jakewith. He's one of the WordPress lead developers. Go watch his security presentation on WordPress.tv. He did this at WordCamp Phoenix earlier in the year. It's a great introduction to WordPress security. Yeah, if you want to do any development, you should have watched that already, but do watch it. It basically introduces you to all the concepts you need to know for WordPress security. It's an excellent presentation. Again, I'll be releasing these slides later because it's really actually hard to make out what those characters are in that short URL. So now actually let's take a step back here and let's actually, so I was just showing you the concepts, but let's actually see what that looks like, and we'll see if actually pulling open my text editor is something that works here. All right. So I've got my portfolio theme. All right, so I've got my portfolio theme in my text editor here. And so we were looking at the single version, correct? So this is what it is. That's actually surprisingly readable. We'll bump that up a couple notches. So these are standard WordPress template tags here. The get header, that actually basically just includes the header.php file from your theme, so you can have a common header across your whole theme. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to change the header from the parent theme. It'll just look in the parent theme. And then we're calling the post just to set up our to set up our loop environment. I'm not bothering with the rest of the loop because there's nothing to loop through. This is a single one. So I got a bunch of HTML here, and then the first thing I'm doing, I'm echoing out that live URL, right? Because I want to be able to link to that live site. And so you see I'm running it through SQRL, and I'm doing that inside there. So let's actually have a look first at what one of these looks like. So as you see here, the first thing I did is I have a title, right? And I use the WordPress template tag the title. This is standard theming stuff. And so that's what you see up here. That's the title. And then the next thing I do is I make the link to the live URL. Sure enough, if you look down there at the bottom, you can see this would take me to blogger.com, which in reality I did not make, but well, that'll be our secret. And then the post thumbnail, right? As I showed you earlier, we had the SD portfolio. It actually takes a second argument where you can customize some of the attributes on the link. I don't like images to have titles. I think links should have titles, not images. So I pass false because WordPress by default is going to put a title in there. I don't like that. And I can customize the class as well, like the CSS class or the HTML class that's going to be on that image. And I want that for my CSS later. So I give it its own. And that's it. So that gives us the title, that gives us the image, and here you can see we have the client quote, the work done, and the agency, the other components. So as you see here, we go through, we edit these out. So the actual quote, the quote was in that text area, right? It's a little longer piece. I'm actually running it through a few little bonus functions here. First, I'm running it through, so I'm getting it. I'm doing the escape HTML. I'm actually adding some quotes to it because it's a quote. I don't want my client to have to bother typing in those quotes, but it'd be nice if it's in quotation marks, so I'm adding them. I run it through WP Texturize, which is a pretty cool little internal WordPress function that turns dumb quotes into smart quotes and other nice things like that. Just nice little bits of formatting. It'll do stuff like turning 2 dashes into that nice long M dash, some nice typography stuff. And then I run it through WP Auto P, which will automatically convert double line breaks into HTML paragraph tags. Internally, whenever you call the content, which we're going to call later on, which displays the actual post content, WordPress is running it through Texturize and Auto P automatically. So that's how this is actually how WordPress started. WP Texturize, Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, was running the predecessor to WordPress was something called B2, a blogging platform, and he wanted his dumb quotes to turn into smart quotes, and so he picked up a book on regular expressions, learned how to do them, and he wrote the early version of WP Texturize. So typography is what made WordPress exist. That's how the founder got involved in the project. And then we're echoing out the quote. And then, so the work done, very simple. Get it, say work done, get the post meta, escape HTML, and echo it out. Same thing for agency. And then we're going to get into entry content. We call the content, which is gets us, again, all the content that we wrote in that editor area. That's what gets echoed out there. And then I'm doing a variation. I'm using printf to just nicely put out a view link at the end. Because if someone scrolled down that far, maybe you want a view link to the external URL. So we'll just see what that looks like down here. So you can see view, and I show the title, and that takes me again to whatever that external URL was. If they've scrolled down that far, you don't want them to have to scroll back up to the top. And so, and now we're not going to go into CSS here, but the 2011 theme is what's known as a responsive design, which is pretty cool. What that means is the theme itself adapts itself to different browser widths and viewing contexts, and in a really smart way. And so you'll see here as we shrink this, everything kind of adapts down. The layout of the quote and work done changes. It's kind of fun stuff. We're not going to cover responsive design in this, but you can look at the source code later and see some of that. You had a question?
Firefox and rapid development schedule, trying to release a new version every 3 months. Chrome going to do basically the same thing. I would assume that Safari and Explorer are going to have to do the same thing to be competitive. How fast are you finding the templates able to keep up?
Fairly well. I mean, you're basically seeing, you code things well. You take advantage of the new technologies where you can. Internet Explorer is always kind of the chain around our necks. It keeps us from being able to use all the newest and fun stuff. But I mean, that's the great part about HTML and CSS is it's still always very backward compatible. You just may not be taking advantage of all the newest stuff. But the old stuff still works just fine. So we did a little responsive design here. If that's a new thing to you, the fact that you can start adapting layouts that way at different sizes and different environments, you should look into it more. It's awesome. Ian did a great job here with 2011 making it responsive by default. So you can view this all the way down on your mobile phone. All right. And so that's that. So that's our single portfolio item template. And let's jump back in here. our archive template, it's similar to the portfolio item, less detail, right? If you remember, I showed it to you earlier. We'll go to the link here. So we've got multiple items. All we're showing is the image and just the title, and then if you click on it, it'll take you to that single item, right, for more detail. This isn't necessarily the best way in the world to make a template, but that's the way we're doing it this time. And so we want to add some JavaScript for the whooshy bits. And WordPress, it turns out, has a good way to do that too for managing scripts. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to write this straight in your theme file. We can register a script. So we're going to register a script, and later on we can on-queue it, or basically on-queue just tells WordPress, queue it up. We want this to show. So register script name, and we give it a URL. We can give it some dependencies. So like if it's dependent on jQuery, for example, which WordPress has built in, we can just say that it's dependent on jQuery. That way WordPress is going to load jQuery first and then our script. And if it doesn't find this dependency, it's just not going to load our script at all. Give it a version number if you want. And the last argument is if you should load it in the footer. In most cases, it's a best practice to load JavaScript in the footer for performance reasons, speed of loading. So if it works down there, use it, but it defaults to false, so you got to set that to true. So here's a sample from the actual theme. I actually registered 2 scripts. I register the Flex slider, which is the library that produces that slideshow, and then I register my own script, which actually uses it and calls it. So as you see here, I declare the Flex slider script, and then when I register my own script here, I'm calling that as my dependency. And so that makes sure, and then I'm actually on-queuing my own portfolio slideshow script. So that makes sure first that this is loaded beforehand, and then it says, oh, this needs jQuery as well, because it's a jQuery plugin, so it's going to make sure jQuery is loaded beforehand. And so this just makes sure that all your script dependencies are taken care of. This also lets you say, you actually only want to show this script and bother loading it on that actual portfolio archive page. You don't want to load it anywhere else. It doesn't need to be anywhere else. And so we'll use conditionals elsewhere, and I'm not going to show you that, but you can use conditionals to make sure you're on that page, and then only on-queue it on that page. So we've done that. I'm not showing you how to write JavaScript and CSS today. I'm showing you how to do WordPress stuff. But that stuff's all in there. If that stuff's interesting to you, you can examine the code. So we made a child theme. We made a custom content type or a post type. We added and retrieved metadata, and we did it securely so that our client sites don't get hacked or just look bad. We created a custom content or custom post type template, both for the single and the archive view. And we added JavaScript the WordPress way, which isn't something I learned to do till much later, but it is hugely helpful. And yeah, there's even plugins that'll then take advantage of all that to concatenate and minify and all that good stuff if you register stuff properly, if that means anything to us front-end developer folks out there. If you want to learn about WordPress, I help run a WordPress meetup here locally with Ian Stewart. So you can come hang out with WordPress nerds. Winnipeg, wpmeetup.wordpress.com. If you just search for Winnipeg WordPress Meetup, you will find that site as well. Again, I'll be publishing these slides later, but we're easy to find. We try and do like the first Wednesday of every month, so if you want to learn more, come hang out with us, have a beer, talk WordPress. And yeah, so that's the plug for the meetup. And we've got I've got the code for this theme up on GitHub, so anyone can freely check it out or have a look at it. It's free. It's open source. Yeah, so that's the end of the presentation. We're at the time for questions. I don't know if Kathy, you want to do the giveaway stuff now, or should we do questions first?
Questions now. We have a few minutes.
10?
What I'll do is I'll
All right, great. So yeah, any questions from anyone?
Do you know any good sites for tutorials and other resources?
Tutorials and resources. There's, what's it called? There's a site, like Smashing Magazine has some good ones. There's a site called NetTuts. It has some good one. I think there's actually they might have a dedicated WordPress site now as well, that network. Honestly, the WordPress codex itself is awesome. Like it's set up documenting functions essentially, but there's some other articles even on there that are very useful. There's a WordPress developer named Justin Tadlock. He has some excellent tutorials on his site. Let's see who else. Yeah, those would be a few places to start.
For tutorials, but if you want to, like, there's also an IRC channel.
Yeah.
If you need help with something.
Yeah. So if you know what IRC is and how to use it, Pound WordPress on Freenode is a pretty good place to talk to some WordPress people. Yeah.
If you were to recommend like your 5 most used and favorite plugins to a video.
W3 Total Cache is great. It helps your site do much better under high traffic loads. What else? I write most of the stuff I want these days, so shoot, what else do I use? It's not a free plugin, but there's a plugin called Gravity Forms, which I use on every single site. It's a form generator plugin. I was talking to a couple people earlier. WordPress is terrible at handling forms. It gives you no help at all. Gravity Forms provides a great UI for building forms and embedding them in themes. It's fantastic. I think a single license is $30, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. Fantastic plugin. I use it on every single client site I do. Otherwise, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry. Those are good ones. If you wanted to ask me about for specific use cases, in most cases I can come up with something, but off the top of my head, it just depends on the site, right? Any other questions?
No, portfolio item is a video file instead of an image.
Mm-hmm.
Is that more or less the same?
Different. You'd be able to associate a video file with it. Yeah. One of the things that happens internally is every time you hit that upload file dialog that popped up, if you're in a post editor, WordPress automatically actually associates it with that post. So you'd be able to do some stuff with it that way. But the item itself, so it would be associated anyway.
It's a little bit like, as soon as you're doing video on websites, first of all, where are you going to host it? Is it going to be hosted on your website, or is it going to be a YouTube link? So if it's a link, then you add a meta field with a link to the YouTube thing, and then in your theme, you output that in some way that is going to produce an embedded iframe.
Yeah.
I guess that's what you would do, but
yeah. There's a few ways you could approach it for sure, but most cases you don't want to be hosting your own video.
yeah,
Good. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So Louis Giz, our business director, is collecting the evaluations tonight, and maybe what we'll do, while you're finishing off there, is we'll actually do the door prize.